All right, I think we are live.
Are we live? Finally. Hello, friend. Nice to see you here on the internet again.
Yes. Thanks for sharing some more screen time with us. You know, we're all getting to the point where we just want to put our phones and our computers down, but it's also nice to just hang out. We hope this is going to be a fun time for you, something out of the ordinary, out of your ordinary schedules.
Yeah. And I feel like, I love the fact that you and I can have this like free-flowing conversation, because obviously we talk about this all the time. So it's nice to be able to, again, start a conversation about equity in practice. We're really excited. Again, working with Working Not Working, and doing a partnership with them, developing this series, because we had such a great, overwhelming response from the very first one we did in June. You guys sent us over a bunch of questions, really smart, really thoughtful questions. And, Jezz and I decided maybe we should make this thing a regular occurrence, right? There's so much to unpack. There's so much to have discussion and conversation about. And I think it's important to really give space for that, so that we can feel like we're also exploring the right language, right? For us to go back and really think about, and then also, go ahead and talk to leadership, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends about what we talk about in this space too.
That's really what we need to push for, the change that we need, right? Dialogue and space, like space in our day to think about these things, space within relationships to have the dialogue, open the conversation so that we can co-create the reality that we want to live in. Because I think that a lot of the times over the past few months, we've seen the social media feeds change a little bit, and people aren't talking as much about racial equity and social justice and dismantling racism as much online. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't very real still, and people are feeling them on many levels. So that's the purpose of this series, Equity in Practice. And to reintroduce Jen, if you were at our first webinar together, welcome back. Thank you for hanging out with us again. And if you're just joining for the first time, we hope you'll return to the future conversations we have. But to reintroduce Jennifer Ekeleme. Transform from the inside out. And that inside out is important because we can point fingers all we want, but it really always starts within, internally. And she's been working for nearly a decade, developing strategic visions for a bunch of Fortune 500 brands, and has worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in the beauty and wellness space as well. And she founded Gen Zen Co-Creation Studio to combine her passion for wellness, spiritual principles, and personal development, which are all so important, with her experience as a brand strategist throughout advertising, and really infuses that humanity into her work, which is, again, something that is really going to help transform the industry that we live in. So wherever you are, give a clap for Jen.
Thank you. Those are such nice words, right? Thank you for introducing me. Okay, so I'm going to do you the honor of introducing you as well. If you all don't know, I can't believe if you're on this, you haven't heard of Jezz Chung, Jessica, long version, Jezz, short version. You are obviously committed to building through conscious creative expression, right? You basically have all of this amazing experience all into one, right? You have experience as a strategist, project manager, a copywriter. You've done work like creating global campaigns for Apple, for YouTube, even Sonos. And I think all of what you do is very interesting because you're always bringing in concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but obviously through your lens of creative expression, right? So and also what I really love about you is that you're a voracious reader. You're always reading about whether it is racial equity or, personal improvement, self-development. You are obviously a voracious reader and really engage in various modalities of personal development and holistic healing, which are also infused in your practice of equity. You are a poet. You are also a writer and a thought leader who often talks about the intersections of your identity as a queer Korean American with a chronic mental health condition. So you were just recently honored as a Ad Color and Ad Week champion and featured in the April 2020 cover of Ad Week for your efforts to create more equity in creative industries. Give it up for Jezz Chung. You know, thank you. It's really an honor to have this conversation with you because I know that you have been working at this for a long time, and we have such interesting backgrounds, different but converge at a really interesting point of understanding and wanting to create more conversation and more room for diversity and inclusion and equity to be like a table stakes, right? But also working in creative industries and work as creatives, but in different capacities. So
yes,
really,
we are all creatives and strategists.
We're all creatives.
We are all creating something. We're all strategizing. Our life is a strategy. If you think about it.
Yes.
But side note, I think that this is a little off tangent, but I think as women of color, we can collectively work on hearing things about ourselves and accepting them with more, just accepting them instead of just always deflecting. Yeah. So I was practicing that as you were saying. I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and be comfortable with this.
yes, I know.
Because it's uncomfortable.
I accept. Thank you. Yes, all those nice words about me are true.
Yes. Exactly. Right, so getting into what we're here to talk about, which is rewriting the rules of the workplace, like redefining workplace culture, really. And what that means to us as we're talking about this is that, you know, we were really, really inspired by, there's something online. If you Google characteristics of white supremacy culture, it comes up, but it's something from a workbook called Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups, and it's by someone named Kenneth Jones and Tema Okun from 2001. Yes. And they were talking about how white supremacy culture is this idea that white people and ideas and thoughts, beliefs, actions are superior to those of people of color. The ideas, thoughts, beliefs, actions of people of color. So that's really what we mean by rewriting the workplace culture. What did it mean for you when we were talking about this? What did it mean in practice, equity in practice, rewriting workplace culture?
Honestly, it was a relief just to even see this document, right? It was floating around, prominently. Obviously, this workbook has been made for the last, it's been in the internet since 2001, but I came across it a couple of months ago, and I can't tell you the immense validation and relief that I found in reading some of the characteristics, because all of a sudden it came to me that, oh, maybe some of the ways that, you know, we work within the advertising industry and media industry. I've been in a lot of different workplaces, but I always found like the sense of urgency, the wanting to do more just to do more without really a reason behind it, the perfectionism, it really gave me a complex, right? It kind of exacerbated a bit of imposter syndrome when I first came into the industry. And so seeing it laid out like that, I was like, oh, maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm an actual normal human being for wanting more time. Maybe it is okay to feel out of sorts when things are, maybe the pace is way too fast, because listen, everybody that I know that is in a creative field or just any field, tech, education, creative, media, everybody always says, well, can you work in a fast-paced environment? And they really say that because they're like, well, technology, we're able to work from anywhere and do anything. And so therefore you should be able to turn around things in a timely manner. And I have to tell you, as someone who has active ADHD, I also, I'm an introvert, I need quiet time to think. It was really hard to feel comfortable in a lot of spaces that really were forgiving of the ways that I needed to work. So, seeing the document was a relief, and I encourage everybody to obviously research it and look into the document more. But I'm glad that we're talking about it now. We can't get through all 10 of them, but we wanted to really just point out a couple of them because I felt like it was good to understand what those were in order for us to redefine what culture in the workplace should look like.
Yeah, because the fact that it exists provides a foundation of language that we can use to help imagine new possibilities and talk about, well, does it have to be this way just because it's always been this way? And that's an excuse that is used often, right? But this is process, but this is how it's always been. We haven't done it before. That's not what we do. And because of that is what stifles change. And that is what creates this cycle of dominance. Dominance in terms of, and that can be racial dominance, gender dominance, sexual, identity, orientation, ability. There can be so many things. And speaking to, working in a workplace setting, especially in advertising agencies, as an introvert, as someone with ADHD, because I have diagnosed ADD too. And it's really difficult to be in, open spaces, and it's supposed to foster collaboration, but I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, especially when I worked as a copywriter, I can't think of that many ideas in that short amount of time amongst all of the stimuli, because we're taking in, think of all the stimuli that we're taking in, the sounds, the smells, the looking at everything going on, different conversations, everything. So yeah, we're gonna go through some of the characteristics, and then just talk about what we see as a possible. What are the possibilities of change? What can we do to just shift that behavior, even if it's a little bit, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it's just one step towards a different direction? What can that look like?
Yeah. So let's start with one of the first ones that actually stood out to me the most. And I think when you and I started talking about it, we were like, yes, this is exactly it. This is exactly how we I can't see your hands, but I know some of you are. Yeah, that's my life every day. Like, that we need it yesterday. And, there's just this implicit pressure to always prove ourselves, over deliver, overwork, overstretch ourselves. And this sense of urgency oftentimes leads to burnout. I've experienced it myself. I know a lot of people who are freelancers or even full-timers, this sense of urgency, getting it done, with no real reason why it has to be done at a certain time. I think
it comes from fear.
It comes from fear, absolutely.
It comes from fear.
Absolutely.
Like, if we don't deliver this now, then, or if we don't deliver on the timeline that is given to us, then the client might go to another agency. Then we might lose this client. We might lose this work or lose this project. Or internally, if we say, if we're creative or something, we're given a deadline. We need a creative review, and we need X amount of ideas by this date, and we think we can't do that. We can't really deliver on that, but I can't say that because I have a job at stake. And then it becomes so much more layered if a visa is attached to that. If you really need the money because you're supporting other people. There's so many layers to what comes with that sense of urgency.
Yeah. And oftentimes, there's dynamics at play, right? Mm-hmm. So for instance, if somebody comes to you and let's just say if they're in leadership position, possibly a white male, and comes to you and you are not a white male, and they say, hey, there's this new project that's coming in. Can you start it? We're going to have a briefing this week, and we're probably going to turn something around in like a week. Can you do it? And, there's this pressure of like, there's all these things going through your head. Like, I really want to do this, right? But why can't we have I need more time. I know I'm going to want more time, but I don't want to say no because this person in a really high position is requesting it of me, right? And so I know I've been in that position before. I know other people have been in that position before. And it is hard unless you practice, right, of setting expectations and having a proper response to a request that you feel like might be a little, not out of bounds, but puts a lot of pressure in terms of the timing of things, right?
Yep.
So I in terms of the antidote to that, right, what Kenneth and Tema always kind of put forth after putting the characteristics, showing us what it is, they always said, here's an antidote to that. And the antidote to that in terms of behavior is obviously setting different expectations. And I don't say that, I don't think we say that very lightly, as if, oh, it's just as easy as setting different expectations, because there's client expectations, there's your team, there's the CEO, and just upholding the reputation of your company and your team. But I definitely think that it is a part of the values of a company to say, we really value the humans that we hire to do this creative, to come up with these ideas, to come up with these plans to serve our clients. And in order for us to do that in a way that is helpful for and sets the atmosphere for them to do it well, we need to give them time. We need to set appropriate deadlines, you know, for the time.
A question to ask then in those situations is, who am I protecting? Am I protecting the client and what they said? Am I protecting this relationship? Because we all are committed to different things. And that's really where the tension happens in a lot of interpersonal communications and relationships, is that one person is committed to one thing, one person is committed to another, and under those commitments lies different values too. So if someone values, I really value the process, and I value making sure that we are sticking to the process because that's what's always worked. And that might come from so many different just past experiences too. Process may have always worked for them, and therefore, again, that fear of stepping out of that process. But it's kind of on us to really examine, okay, what am I protecting? Am I protecting the creative ideas? Am I protecting the quality of the ideas? So that we're not just saying, okay, we need this now, and then with that pressure, sometimes with pressure comes great ideas, right? But with that consistent, I think with the way that our industry has been working over the past few years, just creates a very unhealthy self-pressure then. And then we label that as ambition a lot of times, and sometimes it is ambition, right? Like we know as like two people who are always striving for personal growth and doing and making the most impact that we can, sometimes that takes over, and then we go into overdrive. So it really is on us to pause in those moments, and instead of just functioning on, okay, go, 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 when someone says we need something by X, maybe it's like, okay, is there any flexibility in that deadline? Can you share more context around what exactly you're looking for? A lot of the times we just don't ask the questions, we accept it, and then when we ask the questions, we realize, oh, they were flexible the whole time. Oh, sometimes people just make up arbitrary deadlines.
They do. Just and as a team, when you hear it, you're like, that is crazy. What is going on? But we never ask, right? We just say, oh, the client is crazy.
Yeah. Which is just it's again, if this is all about, if the change that we're seeking to create comes from a deeper connection to ourselves and connecting with ourselves in like a really, oh my gosh, do you hear the sirens? I'm gonna let them pass. Okay. Change comes from connecting with ourselves in ways that we haven't, because we've just been taught, go to work, do your job. In our industry, there's no really like clock out, because it's a really passion driven industry. But at the same time, there's just so much more room to open a dialogue about the how and about the why.
Right. And I think another antidote in addition to setting proper expectations and different expectations is bring the focus to the progress over the process, right? This what I actually learned. I learned this being at a place that it was a small boutique agency called Wolf and Wilhelmine, and we used to deliver work in progress documents. And actually before that, I had never had the experience of this is a work in progress, and setting proper expectations with a client that's like, we're working on this. This is not done. So we want an opportunity to kind of get your buy-in first, so that obviously we're all aligned and we'll continue the work. But it also, learning how to present work in progress work did a lot for not only my understanding of strategy and development, but also became a new strategy for me as a consultant to bring the client in along the way of the process, right? Because what ended up happening is they also got to learn part of the process. And what I wish more agencies did, whether you're a creative, you're a strategist, or you're an account manager, is to really focus on delivering milestones for the client, setting those clear expectations of what is going to happen with that, but then also allowing team members, junior team members, to see that process and to know that this process can get better over time. The finished product can get better over time. And I've noticed that there is a trend with trying to hire people who have all the experience, who know what to do. And so what happens is people don't get trained on the job when you don't focus on the process. No one learns how is it done, right? And so if you never focus on work in progress documents or work in progress process, young people coming in never really get to understand how to really see the roadmap of how something is developed over time. And if those people never see it, they never get to rise into, senior leadership positions where they can continue this practice of training and process over time. So I'm a really big advocate for it, because it also calmed my own anxiety around developing strategy. I was very thankful for that experience.
Yeah, it is. It's so much over progress over process, progress over perfection. It's just, like, Matt, what you're speaking to is this idea of transparency. If we were just more transparent with where we are, and imagine if we've been seeing on Twitter all these conversations about normalize this, let's normalize this. What if we just normalize honesty in the workplace? If we said, instead of just automatically saying yes, taking a moment, pausing, really checking in with ourselves, like, is this fair? Is this doable? Is this going to overstretch me? Knowing, patterns in the past, and then being honest about that. Like, I would love to, deliver the best I can, but I don't think I can on this deadline. Is there any way to move that? Is there any way we can have a conversation about what we can do to, move this process, to change this process? Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. You're touching on a good segue, which was the other characteristic of perfection, right? Perfectionism. I think we all suffer from it, especially if you are a person of immigrant parents. And that pressure.
That survival mindset is real. It's like,
it's real.
And
that's not just something that we learn at work. I mean, we take it also probably from our family, or in our family dynamics, and maybe our friend groups. There's a competitive nature attached to perfectionism as well, too. But tell me a little bit, because I know we talked about this as well. Tell me how perfectionism has showed up for you, and really talk through maybe how that affected your work and your enjoyment of actually doing your work in the workplace that you work in.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think similar to sense of urgency, perfectionism is so much driven by fear. And it can be, when I was a creative, that showed up as fear of not having good enough ideas, not having enough ideas. Because another characteristic is, quantity over quality. Let's just give 20 ideas so it looks like we did something. When that may not be healthy, that may not be the best approach forward. And I have noticed also the bigger the client, and the maybe the more money they're bringing in, then the greater that fear is of, we can't show that work in progress. It has to be perfect and polished. And I remember when I was working on Apple, we would like print things out really big, check for the tiniest typos, and just do that over and over again. Like the QA process was so intense. And we did that because of the scale of the work that we were working with.
Yes.
But I think for me, that shows up so much in my creative practice. In my writing, I'll write something and think, this feels so cliche. This doesn't feel original, as if there is anything purely original. I hold myself to these impossible standards. And then what that creates is this self-berating and this self-doubt and this lack of confidence and self-trust, which is infused into all of my interactions. And that's not, I can't show up as my best then. So really had to take, and because of my conditions, because I'm diagnosed with MDD, GAD, and ADD, because of my conditions, I've had to enforce those boundaries. I've had to create those conditions myself and really say, okay, when I work with someone new in a big capacity, I'll usually let them know, like, hey, I work best under these conditions. So if I'm, asking these kind of questions or setting these type of conditions, I just want to set those expectations, because then I get these fears of, they think I'm being complicated or difficult or, for changing things up. But I think that perfectionism can show up as so, I think you were saying something earlier about people thinking that they are a wrong person for just doing something quote unquote wrong, as if there aren't even binaries between good and bad and right and wrong. Right. There's so much nuance in between that, but we tell me more about what you think about that, of doing.
Well, there's a difference between making a mistake and being a mistake.
Yep.
Right. And oftentimes managers don't understand the nuance of giving feedback on maybe this didn't work, but that doesn't mean that you're not creative, that you're not absolutely contributing to the team and this company. Sorry about that. So I think that it behooves us all, not even if you're not a manager, but particularly if you're in leadership, right? To say, you know what, we missed the mark on this. But I think here's some ways that we can do it better, right? I think it takes some of the pressure off of people wanting to take risks, because if you're creative, you do have to take risks. That's what makes you a great creative, right? It's also what makes you a great strategist. It's also what makes you a great client account person, because you do have to take risks in saying, I think this is the way that we need to do it. But you need to set certain expectations. You need to know if you're going to set some boundaries around, they asked for this, we're going to flip it a little bit, but if it doesn't work, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're wrong for taking a risk. Yeah. And, I wish somebody had told me that earlier in my career too, right? Because when there is a lot of stake, when you do have a chance to pitch a huge project or pitch a huge brand, there's a lot of pressure to show up, and everybody wants things to look perfect. But the reality is that people are imperfect. Humans are imperfect, and that is fine. That is actually quite okay. That's actually what makes our experience here really good. But I think, as we continue to see our culture and society change, and we're seeing the value of conscious collaboration versus toxic competitiveness, I would much rather, see more people consciously collaborating than getting to into a situation where they're like, well, it has to be right. And I'm a designer, there's 2 designers on this team, and, one person wants to do everything perfect, but really quickly. And so, there becomes that little tension between the 2 designers on the team. And it's like, no, do you need help with something? Can I help you do anything? I think there should be more of a facilitation from senior leaders to say, here's some behaviors that we want to make sure that everyone is modeling.
Yes.
Because it improves the experience for everyone on your team and in the larger community of our agency or of our company. So I go ahead. Sorry.
What you're speaking to is creating more of a community in the workplace.
Right.
And
right.
and if we're, as we listen to the activists and organizers on the ground of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're listening to what they are saying we need to change in all of our systems and structures, they're saying we need mutual aid, we need collective care. And what that looks like is decentering responsibility. And in the workplace, that can look like decentering responsibility, thinking it's all on me. It's all on me. And sometimes creatives can think that, or strategists can think that as they're writing the brief and thinking, oh no, if I get this wrong, that's going to impact the rest of the project. Creatives think if I don't, nail that idea out the park, then the campaign's going to fall through. The account or project manager can think if I, mess up this meeting. There's so many ways where people can think it's all on me, but there's so much exhale and relief when we think, no, we can care for each other and say, hey, what do you need? What kind of support do you need? Imagine if we asked that more in the workplace. Hey, what kind of support are you not getting, and what kind of support do you need? Is there any way I can support you this week? And that way, when you give that to someone else in the spirit of abundance too, which you and I are very familiar with as two people who do a lot of, self and inner work, the idea of abundance is that there's always going to be enough. There's always enough. We're never going to run out of time or resources, and that means that we can give that support to someone, knowing that that support is going to come back to us tenfold when we need it the most. Because there's inevitably going to be times where we're going to need it, they're going to need it. It changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I have often thought, if you're a young creative, let's just say you just started out working a couple years ago. This is maybe your first job or maybe your second job, and you get to this place that maybe was your dream job. You got offered your dream job, and you just can't seem to. There's a lot of things that are happening, whether it is you feel like you're not being heard, the deadlines are extremely tight, and it feels like you can't catch up. Or, there's a particular account person or a manager who's kind of like nitpicking everything that you do, even though at the end of the day, like all of your ideas are great. I think what I would tell that person, what I would tell you all listening, is if you're struggling with the actual culture, and if it doesn't feel supportive, to me, the best thing to do is obviously go to your direct manager and have a very as one book says, radical candor conversation about how you feel, about how you're supported here, because I mentioned to you earlier that Ad Age had released another article about uncomfortable conversations, and the person that they profiled, he kind of was recounting his work as a creative at an agency. It's out in LA. I won't say what it is. You guys can read the article. But he mentioned how he constantly was feeling like nobody was hearing him, right? He wanted to initially go into strategy, but they kind of pushed him into production because he felt like there was no other way to get in. He just took it anyway. But, people ultimately really never made him feel comfortable. And so now he's at a point where he's like, I will never work in an advertising agency again. And so that's how where we lose a lot of talent. Yeah. That's how we lose a lot of talent because, although I think in the last 2 months, we've had a lot of people making statements. We've had a lot of lists and demands made to holding companies that we all are very familiar with. At the end of the day, I just think that people maybe don't feel like it's important enough to actually change how they approach, whether that is recruiting, onboarding, or, handling internal dynamics within their agency. But, people are like, well, where's all the talent? And I'm like, they don't want to come and work for advertising agencies. It's not enough to be aware that there's all this talent amongst LGBTQIA plus people or Black and brown, talent. You have to not just want them to be there, but you have to facilitate a safe, psychologically, emotionally, and physical safe space for them to want to create. Right?
Yeah.
And it's not lost on me that we're still in global pandemic time. So people are not necessarily in a physical space together. So even if you're not everyone, you're working from home, you still have to create frameworks of communication and making sure that people know that there will be a process of retribution, right? There'll be a process of trying to create some solutions to an issue that we have.
Yeah.
There are different things that within culture that are absolutely easy to do. And managing people doesn't have to be hard. I think that if you go into the spirit of what can we learn on this journey together in this workplace, and how can I make it easier for them to learn how to do what they need to do in their expression, that should be the only kind of intention that you have as a manager, and hopefully as a leader, you know. As we said before, it's not that hard to be good to people. It's not that hard to be kind. So I think that if you can start to look at what do people really need, right? How can we use this framework that has been given to us of, okay, we want to be an anti-racist agency. We want to be an agency that's inclusive. We want to make sure that we build equity for people. Mm-hmm. Look at some of these frameworks, right? And I feel like
really investigate because that's when that self-awareness comes in, and we say, okay, in what ways are we creating a culture of dominance? What is dominant in our culture right now? And that culture can look like anything in any singular meeting room, which are, think about if you put gallery view on a meeting, on a Zoom call or Google Hangouts, and see what is dominant. Do you see mostly masculinity in the room? And do you see mostly whiteness in the room? And imagine what that feels for someone who is not dominant in the room, and how you can kind of adjust the culture for them and make space. And you're speaking to, how to create change requires a lot of things, but you're speaking to the idea of we need intention. So change won't come unless we actively intend for it. Intend to change our behavior. So intention, reflection. So once we engage in, okay, you said, companies have written statements, and now a few months later, now what have we done in the past 2 months? What steps have we taken? How can we assess at the end of the year? And then on top of that, that's on an organizational level, but on a personal level, okay, maybe at the end of each week, how did I approach my meetings this week? Did I leave room for growth? Was I more collaborative, more than I was competitive? So that intention, reflection, and then resilience. That resilience, that stamina comes into play, where we're thinking, all right, we really have to hold ourselves accountable. And again, this is what we talked about in the first webinar. This is not for the sake of just each other. It's for the sake of our own betterment, and also for our collective creativity, for our work to be better, for our work to get better. And I think it's also important to note that for like these principles we're talking about, sense of urgency and perfectionism and all these things do weigh heavier on people of non-dominant identities, because there's often more to lose. And often I've talked to a lot of people about how people of dominant identities are given chances and opportunities, while people of non-dominant identities have to prove ourselves.
Yes,
and there's that
absolutely.
Difference. Yeah.
There's always this this concept of exceptionalism, right? When you're the one and only person that's representing, let's just say, a marginalized identity or group. And then all of a sudden you speak for all of the Asian people in a meeting. All of a sudden you speak for all of the Hispanic or Black people, like what do they really like, and that I want everyone who ever sees this, that if you're ever in a position where you are questioning whether that's creative or planned, and maybe you're a non-person of color, but really, really start to put into practice, I'm not going to say, what should we do? What would a Hispanic person do? Or would Black people actually like this? take the time to actually say, you know what, I'm going to say this in front of everyone. I'm not actually sure, what is the right tone, what's the right messaging, what's the right creative that's going to resonate with this group. But let's take some time to really talk to people in that group, do research. If you don't have strategists, right? Strategists can't be in every organization, but if there's a behavior I would want to change, it is that. It is not singling out one person because you only have one person represented.
No experience is monolithic.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we can't, we're all really multidimensional people. We don't, represent, the concept or thinking for a group that we may belong to. Mm-hmm. So, those are things that I think we should all consider. And I wanted to also touch really quickly about when we talk about culture, right? Because the discussion we're having is about redefining culture. And I think when we talk about, well, what is culture? Often people are like, oh, I've heard HR people or recruiters go, it's a really laid back culture. They do tacos on Tuesday. There's happy hours on Thursdays and Fridays. There's they have an open bar. There's a ping pong table. And, one recruiter, after she told me that, I was like, ma'am, that's not culture. Those are operational perks. And a ping pong table is not going to make me feel more included in this very white agency. And she just was like, oh, okay. I guess you're right. And I was like, those things don't matter to me. Maybe it matters to someone who really likes that. But I am not going to put myself in a position where I don't feel comfortable. You want me to deliver something that's really integral and a part of the production process, but yet you've made it comfortable for this percentage of people. Honestly, if you want to start talking about operational perks, I want a meditation room. I want a masseuse. Yep. 3 days a week. Yep. I want yoga in the morning before we have client calls. I want client calls to be at a certain time during all parts of the day. I want there to be a block. There are certain things. If I ran an agency, there would be definite things that I think that should be embedded into the culture, because what happens is then we start organizing our behaviors around that. Yeah. For instance, the agency that I told you I worked at, we had a rule of no emails or calls or meetings after 7 o'clock. Wow. Shut it down after 7. Mm-hmm. No work. We'll start it again tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And no work on the weekends. And we put those in our proposals. We communicated that to our clients, because they often will come on Friday and say, hey, can we have this by Monday? And it didn't matter if it was a principal.
Because then you have something to point back to and be like, hey, this is what we agreed upon. This is how we operate.
What we agreed upon.
Yep.
And it was, and again, you have to see this in practice, right? To know that you can say no or yes, but not in this way to a client, and everything be okay. Mm-hmm. People need to know that you can say that.
Yes, and I think that's something we can ask ourselves. What's the worst that could happen? I had to learn to ask myself that, because there were so many times where I would just, the pressure, the anxiety, I would fold under that. And then, I'm up till 3 a.m. to deliver on someone else's expectations and putting their needs over mine, until I realized, to what expense? To the expense of my health, like my literal health. Like I had breakdowns. I would go into the bathroom and then just have panic attacks, and then come back out and then go into client reviews. And I thought, this isn't healthy. This isn't okay. And it really involves that intentional, like, okay, we got to approach it. Again, we are all strategists. So approaching it, how am I going to approach this project? How am I going to approach this work? How am I going to approach this relationship? And I think the new generation of talent is really doing that, which excites me a lot, about how this new generation of talent is going to eventually be the future leaders of this industry. Mm-hmm. And they're asking those questions. They're saying, how many people of color do you have in your executive team? They're saying, what's your policy on this? They're asking these questions that go beyond, because I think when I was coming up in the industry, I fell for all that. I was like, wow, ping pong table and open bar. I don't even drink, but I was like, wow, cool. Like that must mean they're really open. I thought that must mean that they're really flexible and really,
Right.
you know, I thought that was, I feel like I was conned a little bit. And then you realize, okay, we gotta, if we don't define our values for ourselves, then other people will end up defining it for us.
Oh my gosh, that's a word, Jess. That is a word. Yes. Yes. And I always like to say open spaces don't always mean open minds. We all got conned in about 10 years ago, and everybody was like, we're all for collaboration. All of our spaces, like our new agencies, it's going to be open offices.
Yeah.
And like, it's nice for like the first week you're there because you get to meet all these new people. And then after a while, you're like, oh my God, too much noise. I'm putting on my headphones. You know? Or like, you know, like I mentioned, like in the interview that I had with Ad Age, I just started booking conference rooms because I was like, I can't think. If people are walking by, somebody's having a conversation, or like I had lots of friends at work. And what would happen is I would get to work and we would start to kiki, and then all of a sudden we have a meeting. And then that meeting goes, and then you sit down and you kiki about the meeting. And the client, and then all of a sudden you look down, it's 4 o'clock, you haven't done shit for the day. You know, I had to really give myself physical parameters so that I actually could do my work. You know, everybody knows, like most of the time at work, you know, there's not a lot of time actually doing the work at work because it's still the meetings and, you know, hopefully you're collaborating, you're brainstorming, or, you know, you're talking with the client. But I have to say that, like, the open spaces thing, I mean, it may not be relevant now because of COVID and us working from home, but I definitely think that was one of the things we're all thinking back. Hindsight is 20/20, and we're like, well, maybe that wasn't so great after all.
And
right?
I mean, to acknowledge why that was created, because then that was like that was a wave of let's open it up and be more progressive, you know, step away from
it was a way to get rid of silos.
It was to get rid of silos. So there's always, right? There's always reasons and for why these structures exist, but change is iterative. Progress is iterative. So we can take what we learned from, all right, we can course correct from here and course correct from here, and understanding that perfectionism is real. So letting go of that and knowing, all right, the change we're about to implement is not going to be perfect either, but it's going to be a step in a direction. And then we take that step, and then we learn from there. And then we take another step. And that's really how, you know, slowly change comes. But if we just freeze and then continue those cycles based on the fear of being let go or going against process protocol, or, you know, ruffling feathers with someone, then nothing happens. So it really takes that. I think courage is a big theme too, to create the change that we need. It takes that courage, because courage happens in micro moments, in micro choices, to send that email or not, to take a pause or not, to react or to take a pause and respond.
You're right. It happens in micro moments. And I think, again, the more that you practice those things, right? And it also helps to have a buddy to say, you know, when I CC you on this email, can you make sure to either back me up, you know, or, you know, if somebody makes an inappropriate comment, can you also always be the one that says, I don't think maybe that was the right thing to say, whether that's over email or, you know, during a call. Because again, those are the times where, you know, when something happens, somebody says something or does something inappropriate, and we are frozen with, I really want to say something, but I don't feel empowered to. It's great to exercise your desire to be an ally and to make sure that you're always showing up, not just for yourself, but also for your coworkers, right? Those are the things that define culture. Right? Those are the things that people will always walk away from and say, I felt really supported in this place because there were either moments or situations that I didn't know how to handle, and somebody came and helped me not because they felt sorry for me, but because they genuinely wanted to support me, right? And when people feel supported, they're actually able to blossom in the way that really supports their talent. And I think it's very important for managers and leaders to understand people's motivations and how they work, and really study the people that you hire, so that you can begin to see, like, oh, I see that maybe you need a little bit more time, that you don't immediately answer questions, or you need a lot of interaction to really like get an idea going, or you never really want to work over the weekend because that's time for your kids and your kids energize you. Like start to study, right? And then if you can see, like, oh man, I didn't really recognize that, like, some people everybody needs different things.
Yes,
and
we all have unique needs.
We have all unique needs. It doesn't mean that you know, if you have 63 people in a company, you have to set 63 different processes. It just means, like, where can you be forgiving in the ways that we set up our agency and our company, and what values can you make sure that everyone buys into, that is way more collaborative, it's way more supportive, right? There's more propensity to have progress over perfection. There isn't necessarily scaring people into doing something on time because you want to appear to, like, do something first and fast, right? And that, you know, quantity of more doesn't always equal better. Right?
Developing this culture of support over this culture of fear, and we're working against it. It's more, again, to the concept of mutual aid and collective care, really caring for each other, and understanding that when we provide support for someone on their conditions and their terms, and we're opening an opportunity for them to do that to us as well.
Yeah, it sounds like what you said. It sounds like community. You know, I would love to see our companies and our advertising agencies and media agencies begin to say, how can we help people build more community? Not just little support groups for, you know, BIPOC people, not just little support groups for parents, or, you know, a queer group, right? Like, how can we create community within our walls? So it feels like a safe space, so that we never hear somebody say, I'll never work at an agency again. You know, that's a lot of lost talent.
It is.
That's not that feels like they could never work in these spaces. They deserve to be in these spaces.
Exactly. They deserve to be in these spaces. We deserve to have that talent with us, to learn from each other. It really betters everyone. So to close this out, we've talked a lot about, you know, all these different characteristics that show up, and we said it takes intention. It takes intention to change our defaults, because these are all our default behaviors, because that's how we've just been conditioned to produce, and we've been told that we are only as valuable as what we create and what we can contribute. When the truth is, we are inherently valuable. We have inherent value in our existence. And it's really going to take intention, reflection, resilience, all of that. And if anyone has any questions coming out of this, we are really excited to also announce that we're going to be creating a monthly column, also called Equity in Practice. And this is really to provide some more dialogue and direction. And not that we have all the answers, but we want to engage in this dialogue, and we want to create space for this dialogue. So that's what Equity in Practice is. We're going to be doing more of these conversation series. But if you have any questions coming out of this, any questions about putting diversity, equity, inclusion, those principles into practice in any setting, what does that mean? If you have any of those questions, however specific, you can send them to magazine@workingnotworking.com with the subject line Equity in Practice question, and we will include those in the columns coming up. And is there anything you want to plug, Jen, that you have coming up that you want to let people know about?
Well, I'm really excited to be a part of the Working Not Working team, right? This new partnership is very exciting, and to be a column writer along with you is extremely exciting. I'm very honored. And also, I don't have anything going on other than like I'm continuing this work, right? I'm continuing to do brand development, but I'm also doing a lot of DEI facilitation. I'm doing workshop series, developing specialty custom webinars, talking a lot about how do we redefine culture, how do we infuse inclusion and equity within companies. I do think it starts at the brand level. So it's not as simple as doing a anti-racism training, right? It starts from inside out. We have to really investigate why we want to show up in the world. What is our purpose? What is our mission as a company? And begin to understand the concepts of inclusion. And so that is my work now, you know, and I'm really excited and proud to do it because I feel like the people who I'm working with, they really want to change, right? And so they set a bar and they set an example for other people to also begin to do this work. So I'm excited. I hope that people will send us questions. You can also DM me on Instagram, you know, about questions or just a comment, like send them to me, DM me, you all.
And your handle
is? Continue the conversation. My handle is _JENNZEN_. So Jensen. Yeah, I want to keep the conversation going because I think it's important to have. And I think as we expand our consciousness and awareness about how our inner understanding of ourselves and getting comfortable with ourselves means that we create spaces that are more comfortable. We'll see a lot of things kind of transform and change as well.
Yes.
Where can people reach you, Jezz?
I am at Jezz Chung on all platforms, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. I post a lot of thoughts about equity, identity, creativity. I share a lot about what I'm reading. I just read Audre Lorde's The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. I think that's what it's called.
Oh.
And it's probably my favorite read of the year. So I always share what I'm reading. I also share upcoming speaking engagements. I'm doing a workshop with a strategist, a collective community of strategists on the 20th, I believe. So that's going to be about rewriting your bio, redefining your story. Then I'm going to be on a couple panels at Ad Color as well. So that is September 8th through 10th, I believe. And there's so many great things planned. And Ad Color truly is the best at having the most timely and most powerful, impactful conversations on diversity, equity, inclusion. So I hope people will tune into those. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing more of these, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we're going to be doing more of these.
Yes.
So, you know, if you have questions or you have a suggestion about a webinar topic, conversation topic, please, you know, send us an email because we're happy to consider it and put it as a part of our programming for equity in practice.
Yes, and thank you so much to Moira, to Alex, to the whole
our super team.
Truly, it's really special the way that we are able to carve out a space for this in the interwebs, in the digital space.
Yes.
And there's a lot that goes into creating this and all the technical and the beautiful graphics that you see by Gabby, the designer, with Working Not Working. So thank you to everyone truly who.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Justin and Adam, obviously, for supporting this as well, Amanda. So such a great team at Working Not Working. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, see you next time. Have a good night, everyone.